Hi, up next is Professor Spira. He is an author, musician, PhD candidate in ethnomusicology. He's an expert consultant on the Mucusless Diet Healing System and co-leader of the Breatharian Ensemble. Since his transformation, he has revived Arnold Ethert's works and has helped thousands of people learn how to transition towards mucus-free lifestyles and heal their illnesses. So he's going to play some music for you because he's an amazing musician, and then he's going to give you a speech on his diet and everything. So give it up for Professor Spira. Yeah.
So I'm here today to talk about something called the Mucusless Diet Healing System. And that's this stuff right here. This is, I hope you guys didn't eat before you came in here. This is not pretty. If you want a closer look, I can come down there. But this is this slime, nasty, smelly, viscous stuff that's actually inside of our intestines. But most people don't realize this is here, and people don't realize that this is causing a lot of our ailments, a lot of our problems. You can go down a list of all kinds of problems, from the headaches to the colds to the flus to even the more chronic illnesses and the neurological issues and all this have their source in the colon. And if you could imagine, a lot of this stuff that we eat causes this sort of slime, all this nasty mess, and when we're unable to eliminate it properly, then this stuff forms and it ends up promoting deeper and deeper human illnesses and diseases in the body. And now I wasn't aware of this. I'd never seen pictures like this or had anybody talk about all this like slime and gunk in the body. But when I started practicing the diet, all of this kind of stuff started coming out. I started seeing black sludge and slime and big strands of mucus, and they call it Mucoid Plaque. It's like these mucus ropes. Started seeing worms and stuff that looked like they had been living. All this stuff started to come out. I was doing colon irrigation, so I was doing some enemas along with eating more fruits, vegetables, doing some fasting, that kind of thing. And as this stuff started coming out, it was kind of this realization that, we're eating in such a manner that's diametrically opposed to how our bodies are supposed to operate. So what Arnold Ehret discovered was that the way he looks at the body is the most important thing is actually air. So he said the body's an air gas engine, and biologically we're much more aligned with fruit eating than we are with omnivorish eating, where we're eating the meats and the dairy and all this kind of stuff that's in the modern diet. And so when he started cutting that stuff out of his diet, and then when he had people that were basically on their deathbeds, that's what Arnold Ehret's famous for, is healing the sickest of sick people, which would come to his sanitarium, and he would put them through his regimen, his fasting, and his fruit eating, and his salads and that kind of stuff, and then they would heal miraculously, because the doctors had already given a lot of those people a death sentence. And it was hard for people to believe that using these simple principles, almost any illness could be overcome. And so what Eric started to do is get into it as a lifestyle. And that's what me and a lot of the people in my community are trying to do, is take this diet, take this whole thing into the level of a lifestyle and see where we can take it. Because if the fundamental cause, well, now I guess I understand what foods create mucus, is everybody wants to know that. What foods? Well, let me ask you guys, what foods do you think create mucus in the body?
Dairy.
Yes, dairy is one. What else?
Mucus. Probably some beans, mucus lean.
Yeah, mucus lean. Yeah, we got someone that knows the diet down here.
She's cheating.
All right. Yeah. So on one nuts. Yeah.
Pus, meat.
Pus, yes, is dead animal flesh, decaying, rotting flesh is becoming normal for us, but that's not something that the human body is supposed to deal with, but we've found a way to try and do it. Yet we wonder why there's so many illnesses and things out there, especially things that are new, and these chronic conditions that our ancestors and our ancestors' ancestors, you go back far enough, they didn't have to deal with a lot of those things. You know, and especially if you happen to have a genetic line that takes you down into the Caribbean or over to Africa, you had to even deal with that kind of eating even less. So what we have here is mucus-forming foods, remove mucus and pus-forming foods are meat, dairy, grains, and starches. Now, I would never tell anybody just overnight to stop eating these things if this is what you grew up eating and your parents ate that and grandparents ate that. So what the Mucusless Diet offers is a transitionary system so that you can go from whatever you're eating now to slowly start cleaning yourself out to the point where you no longer crave mucus and pus-forming foods. Essentially, you no longer crave the foods that create human illness. And as long as you have those poisons in your system, you're going to crave it. You're going to want to eat the slime. You're going to think that you never can get off of it. You're like, oh boy, I can never get off of meat. I can never stop eating this kind of stuff. But you don't know what it's like to clean out your intestines, move some of those poisons out, and experience what it's like to be off of those, what we call them drugs, you know, and you don't really get that perspective until you stop eating it. You stop eating meat, and you're like, that got me high. You know, that was in the sense of stimulated. You know, there's and the way that you think. You notice the way that you think changes. The way that you are in the world totally changes. You know, your outlook. So, you know, back to the piece at hand, mucus-forming foods, meat, dairy, grains and starches. But grains and starches are what we call mucus lean, where you can use those to help get yourself off of worse things, you know, worse foods and stuff like that. So we'll talk a little bit about the diet part. A really huge part of Mucusless Diet Healing System, and really the omnipotent process for healing in the world is fasting, you know, the fasting process. And fasting, there's different levels of fasting, and depending on who you talk to, they might really be into one form or another. So some people say, well, the only real legitimate form of fasting is what we would call dry fasting, which is nothing. We don't promote that, because most of us are too encumbered, too filthy to really be able to sustain and cleanse ourselves properly with a so-called dry fast. You know, so there's things that you can take that we would still consider a fasting level. A lot of people are into water fasting. That's another level. We don't necessarily promote that real heavily either. Once you start getting into the juice fasting, which is going to be your lemon juice, then you can, you know, my favorite is a grape juice and apple juice and orange juice and all this kind of stuff. But if you are drinking nothing but these juices, then that can be a form of fasting. So like fruit juice fasting. And what starts to happen is, you know, at first you want to be able to relax. You want to be able to rest. If you're going to do a fast, Don't try to, at first, don't try to expect that you're just going to have all this energy and be able to, leap mountains and all that kind of stuff. That will come. There's plenty of stories of folks and myself and people I know that have done really long fasts. I mean, I've done 6 month long juice fasts, all that kind of stuff. I don't promote that. I'm just saying there's a whole other realm for us to look at that is, just basically a whole other world that we're not really, a lot of us aren't really aware of. And so, my friend that got me into the diet, I witnessed him do a 9.5 month juice fast. And I've seen him do long dry fasting periods, So basically what we're doing is we're questioning everything when it comes to human physiology. Because we're doing things that you're not supposed to be able to do. If you go read the textbooks on physiology, they say, well, you can't do that. You can't fast like that, or you're malnutrition, malnourished, all these kind of concepts. And what we're finding out is there's mechanics to this process, and the cleaner and cleaner the body gets, the easier it is to fast, the easier it is to live on fruit, the easier it is to live on juices or do the water fasting or whatever. When you're really encumbered, the first thing that starts to happen, the fasting is kind of like a constriction process. So you stop eating the food that you normally would be eating, and say you're just drinking juice. Your body starts to kind of contract and squeeze, and it's essentially what it's doing is squeezing the waste out of your system, squeezing out the toxins. Things are loosening up. So a lot of people are right on the verge of a huge mucus elimination. So their lymphatic system starts to secrete large amounts of mucus, so they're blowing their nose and they're coughing up stuff. If you have mucus-soaked lungs, then you start to have, that kind of thing. I used to have bronchitis, yearly bouts of bronchitis, like every year. I would just be just terrible. And then at that time, I played football in high school. And I remember there was one football game, I actually went and tried to play football while I had bronchitis. It was like one of the stupidest things I ever did. And we're talking, I'm like 17 years old. I'm a year away from using a CPAP unit at night, which is like an oxygen mask that you use if you, lots of people, they snore, they'll go to a sleep doctor, and then they'll say, okay, well, they'll monitor your breathing when you sleep. And if you don't breathe well enough when you're sleeping, then it's like, okay, well, the reason you wake up and you're tired is because you're not getting any of the oxygen that you need when you're sleeping. They call that sleep apnea, and then they give you the thing to breathe with. So I was 18 years old, 280 pounds with a CPAP unit, and it was only getting worse from there because I was starting to really get obese, really, really big, kind of like on the obese side of things. And so I was able to turn that around. A few minutes at the end for some questions. Well, I'll open it up for some questions now. Does anybody have any questions that you're thinking about that's in your mind? Yeah.
Now, you mentioned it took you about 6 months to control meat, stop eating meat. Now, in the process of that 6 months, were you eating particular meats, like say chicken or fish, or just like how was your process within that 6 months?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the question was that it took me about 6 months to get off the meat. So was there a specific kind of method or something that I did? There really wasn't a type of meat that I really was using. One of the things that I learned in the process was a lot of people think that fish is like the healthiest meat, but really what we found out was fish is actually probably the worst meat to eat. And the reason is, and if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, but the reason is because fish don't breathe air. So something that breathes oxygen is going to be fundamentally cleaner than something that has to absorb oxygen in gills. And this is sort of self-evident because as soon as you take a fish out of a pond, it already smells bad. It already is starting to smell like decayed kind of flesh, and you just took it out of the water. And so that's sort of letting you know that that's, very, very concentrated. We call that like concentrated pus with the meat. So I kind of stayed away from the meat. the big things for me were trying to get off of like pizza and burgers. And so I thought that it would be better for me to eat like sandwiches, and so I started eating these like little lunch meat sandwiches like once a week. And but I started having the big salads. One of the things that I ate to help me get off of meat was 100% wheat spaghetti. You could use quinoa spaghetti or something like that these days, but so I'd have that, but I was starting to make these huge things of steamed vegetables and tomato sauce and all this kind of stuff, and so I really didn't even miss the meat, you know. And I would have a well-toasted wheat bread. That's another transitional item that, you know, if you toast the bread, you kind of cook the gluey property out of it, so it's not as gluey inside. You can imagine, and you can do some of these experiments. Take some white bread, put it in water on the stove, and heat it up for a while, and see if you like the consistency of what that bread turns into, and imagine that turning into that viscous glue inside your intestines in your body. If you were to take some fruit and do the same thing, it's not going to turn into slime. You know, that's the difference. You can figure out what foods are and aren't worthy, slime forming, just based on something like that. But so anyway, that was basically it. I kind of went down to where for maybe the first 2 months I was eating meat once a week, and then I got to a point where I stopped burgers. I stopped the pizza kind of stuff because I didn't want to do cheese pizza. For me, I was like, I'm either going to eat the real thing or I'm not going to eat it at all. So I didn't want that type of transition. These days there's like the vegan pizzas and there's stuff that you can use like that if you have and I had a little bit of that. You know, so, and there was a period where I did eat a little bit of like the vegan processed food, but I didn't want to get trapped there. I didn't want to get to a point where a lot of people that identify themselves as vegans, a lot of their diet will be the processed meat, fake meats, and soy burgers and all that kind of stuff. Fine for the transition, but I don't recommend getting into a mode where you're eating that kind of stuff all the time because it is mucus-forming. But I do remember the last real meat burger I ever had. It was about 3 months into the diet, and I thought that I was doing real good, and I was just like, so I just thought I could just chill and be like, okay, let me just kind of splurge. But because I've been practicing the system, and because I had been really kind of cleaning myself out of the enemas and such, when I ate that burger, it felt like death. I mean, literally in my body. I mean, it was like anxiety. I could kind of feel what a lot of people can't, like if you're conditioned and you're used to eating it, you can't feel that, but you get away from it, and then you eat it, and you can feel the anxiety. You can feel the anxiety that the animal felt when it was dying. You know, but you never really notice that in the same way unless you get away from it for a while. Then you go back and it's like, it's just a terrible experience. And so after that was my last burger. I didn't even mess with that. And really, and the reason I say 6 months, because I was kind of done after that. I had very little meat after 3 months, but I did have a few beef broths unintentionally, and we talk about restaurants and stuff. That one thing that I did kind of get away from was eating at restaurants. There are some people that practice a diet that eat at restaurants and try to find stuff that they can eat and the salads and stuff. But for me, because I was such an overeater and such a glutton, it was basically like a crack addict that's trying to get off crack, that's going to a crack house. And so I basically just had to say, you know what, I gotta just make all my own food and just kind of get out that environment. But one of the things that I kind of realized was most restaurants, unless they're like a vegan restaurant, they don't care about cross-contamination and stuff. So you can say, well, I want a cheese pizza, I'm vegan, and they're like, okay. And then they're in the back, they use the same knife to cut your cheese pizza that they cut the sausage and bacon and pepperoni pizza. So once I sort of got that consciousness together, I was like, okay, well, I'm gonna just have to do this on my own. But
All right, Leviticus, you follow the laws of Leviticus. as far as dietary laws?
I follow if there were laws that I follow Genesis 1:29. You know, that would be more along the lines of what I'm into. Is Genesis 1:29 basically says that humans are fruitarians. You know, we're fruit eaters. In Genesis 1:30, it says that animals are vegetable eaters. Nobody was supposed to eat flesh, you know, not even any animals, and it wasn't until later. And we noticed that humans, every time humans continue to eat poorly, that's when there's like the voice of God comes down and it says, like, okay, you're not going to live as long. So, you know, when Noah gets off the boat and he's all drunk and you know, and they were eating everything, the way I interpret that is, it's not that God's voice of God changes the laws. It's almost basically telling you cause and effect. Because you're already breaking the laws, since you're already doing it, keep doing it. But I will warn you, you can't get older than 120 years old. But where are we at now? Where folks are dying, you know, I know we've got peers and people that I know that's dying in their 40s. It's getting normal now. You know, folks is getting chronic illnesses by their 30s. And, you know, 50s, and now old age is 60s and 70s. So, you know, it's getting really, you know, it's getting worse and worse and worse. And so the way I look at it is, you know, I'm basically dealing with natural laws. And when you align yourself with natural laws, that's when we start to heal. You know, so it's nothing real kind of abstract or crazy or anything. It's just doing putting into our bodies what our bodies want anyway. And, you know, the healing process takes place. And then it starts to transform everything, because it transforms the way we think, starts transforming communities and societies, and, you know, and the whole thing is up for grabs at that point.
How much weight?
I lost about 110 pounds, really. Yeah, I was maybe even more than, I always say 280. I did get to 300. There is proof of that, because I went to the doctor right before I got into the diet, and I clocked in at like 300 pounds, but I wasn't 300 for a really long time, so I don't, you know, I just say 280, but yeah, I got down to about 170, and then, you know, now I might be 180 or something. I don't really weigh myself too often, but yeah, and it happened within 6 months, and it happened so gradually within that 6 months. People that saw me every week, some of them didn't even notice that I had really lost that weight until it was just apparent. And then there's my trombone teacher who saw me every week through the whole process. Like 6 months in, he was kind of like, "Did you lose some weight?" I was like, "Yeah, you can see me every week. Don't you notice?" And I'm like, totally changed, but it just happened real gradually like that.
So, do you also work out, do yoga along with this?
Yeah, and those things are, you know, whatever you're comfortable doing. But yeah, I have Planet Fitness. I do, you know, I work out, and in the science of breath. The science of breath is really like hand in glove with the Mucusless diet, because as Eric says, the body is an air gas engine. So he looks at the body, instead of saying that, okay, we got to eat this food and we get our fuel from food, he's basically saying we get our fuel from the air. We're getting fuel right now every time you breathe. What the eating process does is basically help to cleanse the body. So every time you eat, you're cleaning your system, all the cellular waste, you're helping it to move. You know, so that's why the fruits and the vegetables are the best cleansers for the body. But yeah, all that stuff is wonderful. And and with a lot of people, they notice that their practice is, I know a lot of people that do, you know, yoga, or really that are, you know, from the yoga from India level yoga, you know, and that kind of stuff. And they had just seen miraculous changes in their ability to perform. In you know, whether it be yoga, whether it be there's some professional athletes that do this, that do running and marathon and all that kind of stuff. And so yeah, it can basically, anything that's in that realm. For me, musically, I mean, it took my musical abilities and level to a whole different plateau. and it helped me clear up my mind so that I could study a lot better. I was able to read, you know, before the diet I was so clouded, it was, you know, I would read real slow, and it was kind of hard to do stuff. I got to a point I could read several books a week, and I attribute, right now I'm a PhD candidate in ethnomusicology, and I attribute wanting to go on in academia to the diet, because my ability to study and retain information and all that kind of stuff just like tripled. And so yeah, so it can elevate whatever you're into.